Welcome everyone to the very first episode of S1E1. So to start off, let me explain to you what this podcast is going to be. Each week we're going to select a different sitcom and watch just the very first televised episode and give you our honest opinions based on what we saw from that episode alone. So we're basically going to be erasing all knowledge we have of any future episodes of those shows and judging on first impressions only. Because let's be real, not every mega show started off amazing, and there are a lot of shows that looked great the first time you saw it that tailed off almost instantaneously. So at the end of each show, after discussing it, we're going to be going around the horn and we're going to tell you basically if we're going to be giving the show a green light or canceling it. So anyways, I'm your host, Jay Gags. With me today are four of my oldest friends, Gordo, Ferg, Nick, and Joe. And this week we are going to be discussing Friends. So, Friends, just to give you a little backstory, it lasted 10 seasons on NBC, 236 episodes. But again, we will only be talking about episode one. Episode one's called The One Where Monica Gets a Roommate, and that first debuted September 22nd, 1994. So before we even get into it, I just want to start off by asking, has anyone here not seen Friends yet?
Oh, I watched it last night, but I had never, ever seen Friends before.
That absolutely blows my mind, by the way.
How does that happen?
Me too.
I've never, it's always been on in the background, but I've never consciously sat down and said, I want to watch this show.
But your knowledge going into this, like you've seen a full episode or two before, like you know who the characters were going into this, or you went in fairly blind?
No, I knew kind of who the characters were. I kind of had an idea, but like I said, it was just something I never paid attention to. Like it just wasn't my thing.
And Joe, were you in the same boat? Could you even identify who the main characters were before you had put this episode on?
Yeah, I knew all the actors. I mean, Friends was so present, right?
But did you know their character names or just who they were as actors?
I knew some of them, I think, just from jokes, right? Just around, you know, that Ross is whatever, Joey's the dumb guy, supposedly, or whatever.
All right.
But
so
yeah, it was always in the background as the kind of thing you sometimes see on at a restaurant or a bar or whatever. And I'd always thought that it was just so 90s and gross that I just didn't want to see it.
Well, let's dig into this 90s and gross. So we have to start off with the intro, right? So the intro, it's just, they're all dancing around a fountain. And from the intro, any early impressions? Are we thinking like, what is this show going to be? Like, does this give you any hints?
I thought it was so fake. I thought it was just weird and fake. I didn't know what to expect, but
It's an unnatural, but I feel like you see that a lot in TV anyways. It's an unnatural group of friendship. You know what I mean? Like people don't do that, right?
Yeah.
People don't hang out in fountains and like splash each other unless they're hammered, right?
Well, yeah, put it this way for context, right? We've all been friends for going on 30 years or whatever. When was the last time we all danced around a fountain together?
Yeah.
Been too long. So, okay. So going from the intro, it immediately cuts to the coffee shop. So that's the first time we're exposed to a bunch of the characters. And like the first thing I noticed was it was within 30 seconds, I counted it. We had 5 laugh tracks in the first 30 seconds alone.
So I don't think these are laugh tracks though. This is a live audience.
This is a live audience.
This is live audience.
And they thought this was the most hilarious thing they've ever seen.
I'm sure it's sweetened a little.
They're being cued to laugh too. So
yeah,
like,
there's a lot of pause for laughter type jokes. It wasn't that bad. It was fluent. There weren't long pauses, but I was like, man, they're trying to deliver a one-liner every single line.
And you immediately know who the comic relief is. All those laugh tracks at Chandler.
Yeah. But they gave it
he's
to
that archetype.
And so that was like the first thing that really caught me. And then they were doing this thing where they were cutting to the same scene. Like they were just kind of doing like a time lapse, but within the same day. And I don't know if that was to just kind of express, hey, they just hang out here all day. So this is to give you the vibe that like, this is how their days typically go. But they just kept cutting to the same scene and the same scene.
Can we touch on a couple of things from the coffee shop before we go too far away from that?
sure.
Go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, Central Perk. Wanted to blow my brains out.
Is it not
That was the
kitschy enough
first
for you?
time I was like, okay, this is not for me. I can't handle that. Also, one thing I noticed is the coffee cups they're all drinking are such quintessential 1990s coffee cups from a coffee shop. They're those small at the bottom, super wide. It's the Mike Myers hello joke with the giant cup of coffee, right? Like you don't even if you go into a coffee shop now, I feel like you never see anybody drinking out of a cup that big.
You know, another early impression I had from this too was it was like everybody, like this cast is like a gorgeous cast. It was just like, and I know
So-
a lot of television
Did David
does
Schwimmer
this,
does
but
it
it
for
was
you?
like-
I actually did want to talk about that.
He
That was
wasn't
one of my
there,
notes. I don't think that the dudes are like overtly handsome as they are nowadays. I mean, Chandler's a weird looking dude. Joey, who's ends up, being the kind of like the sex symbol. Like he's not. I don't see anything ringing any ladies' bells over. And Ross is just oafy and weird.
Yeah, so a couple things that I noted earlier. Early on, everyone was telling a joke basically, except Ross, who was ultra depressing, and like right off the bat, and it was like wasn't in a funny way at first. It wasn't like you didn't get a laugh out of his like doom and gloom. It wasn't like Eeyore-ish. It was just straight depressing, and it like
Oh, my
kinda
wife's a
cut you out of it.
lesbian. Like,
But yeah, so I thought the early impression of it was like, okay, so we're seeing the group dynamic here. Everyone's kind of the funny one. I'm not really getting too much of a vibe of who's who yet, but it's, we're still a few minutes in. And another thing that kind of flagged my attention was it took a few minutes before you learned anybody's name. And I know like in typical conversation, it's not normal for me to go, Nick, what did you think of that? Or, hey, Ferg, are you going upstairs later?
Right.
Like, it's like people don't talk like that, but it took a while to establish who anybody was name-wise. And
I just
thought that
called them
was-
haircut 1, haircut 2,
Yeah.
and haircut 3 at that
Thank God
point.
those
because,
haircuts.
Oh man, are those haircuts out of
Yep.
control?
They were
I did-
timely, though. They weren't like radical for when that show came out.
we've
No,
all
but
had
I
again,
those
thought,
they're-
haircuts
I
at one
thought
point.
Joey's hair looked like a wig.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
100% convinced that Joey is just doing a Tony Danza impersonation that entire episode, and it
Yeah,
blew my
so-
mind. And I've never seen other Friends, and we're not supposed to mention other episodes, so I guess not. I don't know if he continues to do that, but if he does, I'm surprised by it.
I was
So what
going
I
to
think
say it
was
was
stood
very
out-
caricature.
Yeah. What I thought stood out was the clothing and just the general style. And you see it a lot, obviously, because it was a big thing in the 90s. But the sleeves for men were so big. Like everything was intentionally very, very baggy. And it's so dumb to look at. I think that's also like a tough thing to do with first episodes of things, especially if you're going back, is you kind of have to be in the 1994 mindset, right? You
Yeah.
can't look at it from now. So because you're going to be way too skewed on it. But
So
that was just, I feel like even back then that was kind of silly.
So to watch this now, an episode from 1994 and 2021, do you feel that it comes off dated?
No, I don't think that the outfits aren't a big enough part of the show for that to matter.
The hair did it for me. It made it feel very dated.
I was going to say, as you get further and further into the episode, it kind of starts to date itself.
Yeah. And so a few minutes into this, there's a whole thing where we find out Ross's wife left him to pursue a relationship with another female. He's very upset about it. They're like, oh, the whole you need to move on thing. And you have Joey, who's like very like, he's just very stereotypical, like, I love girls. Like that's kind of like most of his lines early in the show are just projecting that. It's like, oh, we need to get you to a strip club and like that kind of stuff. And he's like, oh, I just want a bride or whatever. And enters Rachel. The first time we see, like, now we're learning who like the sixth cast member is to make this, 3 guys, 3 girls. And from the intro that she's one of the main people. And they're already planting the seeds now that like she is the answer to his dreams. And is that like a typical relationship? Like, do you see the two of them as like, is this like every show kind of has that, like they are planting the seed for a relationship that you're going to be rooting for? Do you find like this is something that you're like, you want to see happen right off the bat? Does this make sense to you? Like this doom and gloom guy and this stunningly beautiful woman who just ran in, like, does this make any sense?
For me, no, because he's just so hateable. I can't stand Ross.
At that point in time of the episode, no, that doesn't. You could see where they were planting the seeds, but at that particular point in time, I didn't make enough of connection to either character to want to root for anything.
So
I think
Ferg,
you
at
can
this
see the A
point,
to Z though.
yeah, at this point in the show, do you already hate Ross, or are you using your knowledge of the rest of the show to hate Ross?
On the contrary, I love Ross by the end, but that doesn't exist. From my first impression, I can't stand the mopey Eeyore type and just, oh, my life sucks. Like,
Yeah.
I did feel he was overly depressing to start the show.
So
Especially where everyone else was telling a joke immediately. He was like too much of a contrast to that.
So I also
Mhm.
noticed too that I forgot the timeline myself because I thought at this point it had like just happened. But then when he mentions that she went to pick up all of her stuff today, you realize that it wasn't new. And he's still just being this mopey, that far after the fact that she's already moved out. She's just now getting her stuff. This has already all happened. And I kind of agree. That's a little too mopey and complaining.
yeah,
I didn't even pick that
he's
up.
just so hateable right away because of that. It's like, and anybody who's been broken up, you always try to put on like a good face for your friends at least, but he's just like pulling them all into his like mopiness where they're just having a good time, hang out.
So this was kind of like I said, they kind of planted the seeds early that, Ross and Rachel might be what you're looking for as far as the relationship that could develop in the show. So when this scene ends, we go to the next scene is at Monica's apartment. And I think this is obviously something that's flags everyone's attention is like, how does she have this gigantic, beautiful apartment in the middle of New York? It like with no roommates. It's completely illogical.
It's 2 bedrooms with that giant window. There's no way. She's a chef.
Yeah.
Gordo has worked as a chef before, and I've seen some of Gordo's apartments, and they're not that apartment.
I was going to say, no chef is going to be able to make that in 1990 to be able to live there. It's
So
very
here's the
unrealistic.
other problem too. They do eventually explain that, and I think
Yeah.
it does. But if we're ignoring that, right? We're ignoring that. So rent in 1994 in New York City was $1,150 a month for a 2-bedroom, and now you're not talking about that 2-bedroom. Okay, you're talking about a New York City apartment where the 2 bedrooms are basically the same bedroom, and there's a living room and a kitchenette. Right, that's $1,150. Now consider the square footage, and we'll double that, so $2,300. Right, and they were making. It was $4.25 minimum wage. There's no way she was making more than that. She wasn't making in a year what she had to pay in rent.
Yeah, because to jump ahead a little bit within the same episode, and we'll go back again, you see like she's like a chef, but she's not like
She's
the
like a
head
line chef.
at a
Like,
restaurant. Yeah,
right,
she's like more a line cook. She had another girl work beside her at the same position. But yeah, so that was definitely something that immediately, as soon as you cut to that apartment, you're like, wait, whoa.
And
This is
even
like-
aside from the apartment itself, it's the decor. Like it's very nicely furnished too. Like where did she get the money even for that?
because there's a lot of, I mean, and props to the set decorator because there's a lot of detail. This looks like a very like lived in established apartment.
2
So they
bedrooms.
did put
I
their
can't get
diligence.
over that. And I've slept on the floors in some gross apartments in New York in the past 15 or 20 years or so that probably were 2 bedrooms that probably cost $2,400 now, and they were so disgusting.
Another thing I
They were
noticed
not
though,
bad.
if you ever watch the establishing shot of the outside of their apartment, they start up probably like 3 floors from the top, and it's about a 6-story walk up. So these people are walking up 6 flights of stairs to get home every day. And I go up 3 and I want to kill myself every day. So 6 floors walking up, that's gotta suck.
And within the scene, they're also doing a lot of talking about Monica's upcoming date, like with someone she's already seen a couple times named Paul. Are we under the impression that this is someone who's going to be in the show for a while? Like the way they're talking about him, I kind of felt right off the bat, you know that they're throwing this in here to kind of have like a negative to fall. Like I just right off the bat, nothing felt like, oh, Paul the wine guy is going to stay. He just seemed like a disposable character.
There was a lot of times where I paralleled this to Seinfeld because that's a show I really
Joe, I
know
swear to
very
God, I
well.
was going to say the same thing.
Right,
I was
yeah,
gonna say,
so-
that's a very Seinfeld conversation they have.
Right, they're having a very Seinfeld conversation. The person has a very Seinfeld name, the wine guy. Right? That's such a Seinfeld type thing. So you know just by the history of that, it's a bunch of New York people, a weird eclectic group. They're calling people weird names they're going on dates with. You know it's not going to last just by that.
Yeah, I was going to say, just by the name Paul the wine guy, it wasn't going to last.
Also consider there's already a lot of characters, right? So how many more do you really want to add as a, part of the permanent ensemble?
Yeah, it's not a chorus line or something where you have this 30-person troupe hanging out.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a show about 5 people. And in an apartment they can't afford.
And soon after, we cut to Monica's actual date where things seem to be going well. So I think to me that further explains like something's going to go bad because it's too much good buildup, right? That's just not how this works. The date's going okay. Cutting back again to Rachel, who's at the house, and Rachel's leaving very, very long messages to her now ex. And I guess we didn't talk about that earlier. So Rachel runs in a wedding dress when they're at the coffee shop and explains that she basically just runaway bride just left her wedding. And I'm sorry that we didn't get into this earlier because I feel like that's obviously a big talking point. She just exited her wedding and ran straight to a coffee shop where apparently she knew that one of her old high school friends would be there.
Fun fact about that is when Monica goes to get Ross his coffee, you see in the background Rachel run by to go to Monica's house.
I did not notice that.
That's a nice detail because to me this makes no sense. So I guess he did run back and happened to see her inside, and that's what spawned her to walk into this coffee shop with her wedding dress on.
Or maybe she needed to find a phone or something too. So I think that's too. I think the fact that she's running. How far away is this wedding? How far is she traveling through New York City in a wedding dress? Is the question.
She just was sprinting in a wedding dress all through New York. And I mean, if there's ever a city that like no one would pay much mind or like attention to that,
true.
That's true. Yeah, everyone's seen scarier, weirder things in New York than that. They give her. I know it's a first episode, you have to, but they give her so much that's just kind of mind blowing. The whole, my parents pay for everything. That's why I'm getting married. They really set you up to hate her.
Yeah,
she's completely spoiled.
I wrote that.
She ran away from this guy. She's going to take over her friend's apartment, who she did not invite to her wedding. It ends up just being, they set her up to fail immediately. That you aren't going to like her, and then you don't want her to be with David Schwimmer, who I find the only one who's kind of charming.
Of course you do.
Yeah, I wrote that down. I wrote I hate Rachel, right? But then I realized that's the point. They want you to realize that she's kind of like morally lost and has never really had to do anything. And this is where the show starts for her. She's gonna,
it's her redemption. Yeah.
So she obviously is a character that needs growth. Like, and it's pretty established. And to jump around a little bit, there is a scene later on where she's almost dumbfounded just to realize she's the only unemployed one of this gang now that she's just like entered into. So like all of the rest of them have jobs, and just the concept of that was strange to her, which is maybe a little bit of an over embellishment for her to be that lost to not realize that people of that age all have jobs. But
yeah,
not to jump ahead, but I appreciate when they give her the job at the coffee shop, they don't try to push it down. They're not like, oh, she's a rich girl, now she's working at a coffee shop. She's just a regular person. They just treat it like, and she got a job, which I kind of appreciated. They weren't like trying to mess with any of that.
Well, I think
like,
it's
everyone
important.
seems to have regular jobs.
Yeah, they don't have like you don't find out in this episode what Ross does, as far as I remember, right? You don't.
I don't
know. Talk about it.
No.
So
We learn
Monica
what
is a
Joey
sous
does.
chef. Joey's basically unemployed, and Chandler does a shitty data entry job, right? So they don't really have room to be talking shit about what she does.
And what age do you assume they all are from watching this episode?
I assumed 25-ish,
I thought
21 to
30.
25.
Yeah, they have like the out of college feel, but like not too overly established. Like none of them are like, they have jobs, but none of them are like in super secure into like a career, it seems, from what we're seeing at least. So there's a lot of cutting around. You see a lot of sad. They did a little bit of cutting back and forth to seeing Ross sad, Rachel sad. Right? They're really establishing that this is going to be a thing. And I have a couple other weird notes. So Monica's
I like that they show that they're building all the furniture together. I thought that was a very relatable.
I also thought his apartment was very realistic.
Right.
Yeah. And especially compared to like where we saw Monica's earlier. Like this is a more realistic apartment.
And that's the first time too you get the joke that immediately lands that they wouldn't make now, which, not putting anything towards whether it's right or wrong or whatever, but they make that joke where he said, she's a lesbian. She used to only drink beer out of the can. I should have known. It's one of those jokes that you immediately see and you're like,
weird, like
that you couldn't do that now, right? The first, like, okay, this was 25 years ago.
It was that whole scene. There was a few things that like flagged my attention. That's when I really established, okay, it was like, Joey, we get it. You like girls, because he's exclusively talking in these kind of like one-liners, like, about like wanting chicks and like doing stuff with chicks. And Chandler exclusively talks in jokes, like only talks in jokes. There's no normal dialogue with him. It's all witty one-liners.
I'll tell you
This
what
is the
got
scene
me.
too that's super Tony Danza.
I'll tell you what got me though is when Chandler says he wishes it was a lesbian, and then says, "Oh, did I say that out loud?" I didn't remember that, and it caught me off guard, and I thought it was genuinely
too.
funny. Yeah,
That and
There
his
were a few
dreams.
times I actually laughed, and I was a little mad at myself. There was one time where somebody did a spit take, and I laughed, and I
yeah.
was very surprised. But it got me a few times.
I was gonna say his dick phone dream was pretty good.
I
He
just
answered the
thought-
phone and it was his mother.
I just thought like for them, it's weird because there's all these like, I don't know, like we said with Rachel, like it really embellished like that who she was and like, you know, like spending daddy's money, and the way Joey's character was where he's only talking about girls and Chandler only talks in jokes, and Phoebe, who's hardly in the episode really. Phoebe's
Very
like,
insignificant. Yeah,
he's like really like watching this episode, you would not know if she's a main character other than the fact that she's in the fountain scene in the intro. So you know she's there because they need 3 and 3, but like there's nothing to tell you that like she's actually a main player on this thing.
Well, they
But-
do give her backstory though. That was another good laugh moment. The whole depressing spiral of
everybody kills
Everybody
themselves.
kills
themselves.
Yeah.
But other than
Which is
like,
well, you think that maybe this happens. I have no idea, but you think that she would make more sense to end up with Schwimmer.
but is there a point where like watching this, you know, with the 6 main characters, is Monica the only realistic character type that you're seeing here? Because everyone else seems so embellished to me that it just
Yeah.
seemed like off.
I have
the
her written
only
as
go,
the,
like, oh, this
the
seems-
mother of the group. Like
Yeah.
she takes
for
care
sure,
of all
yeah.
of them.
She didn't have like traits
act
that like
together.
struck you as like odd and not likely to be like of this world.
She did, and I'll tell you what they were. At least 3 times during this episode, her and Ross are way too touchy. And they're brother
Yeah.
and sister. They're sitting next to each other. She's always grabbing his hand, his hands on her lap, or they're just like basically cuddling on the couch. And I was like, this is uncomfortable to watch, especially as you establish that they are brother and sister right
Yeah,
up
I'm
front.
you don't
trying
pick
to
up on it
remember,
right
when-
away
when
until
did they
say they went to
establish that?
school.
When was it established that they're brother and sister?
When Rachel actually comes in and she introduces her to everyone else, and she goes,
Right.
"And you remember my brother Russ?"
Right.
Didn't they
And then when,
kiss,
not to go
too?
ahead, but when Paul the wine guy comes out of the bedroom, he's there. They talk about it at the table, and everything's just
Yeah.
it's
Hey, you
weird.
banging my sister?
Yeah.
Oh.
So to go back to you know Paul the wine guy a little bit. How do you feel about like his like for a television show, for a sitcom, for his move to get with her is to tell her that he can't get it up.
That's super rapey, right?
I don't know why
Yeah.
it works.
Yeah.
I really
It
don't.
was just like it was
It's
just
strange, yeah.
It was just like I don't know. That one caught me off a little bit because I'm like, that's. I mean, I guess it worked, but it just like this didn't seem fitting. I was like, this doesn't. I don't know. Like maybe it worked better for the time. Maybe
No,
things-
it's not a time thing. Like no time in the world
Shut
can
up.
someone be like, yeah, well, let's go home. Like what girl would that like turn on?
It's like insinuating that they're making it now their challenge to be the one, right?
yeah.
So then when they do go
Yeah.
home and it does happen, they feel like they did something good, right?
when he delivers
sense.
that information to her. Is that a flag to you? Like, did you pick up that like this was?
Oh, right away.
I did not. I didn't. And
Instantaneous.
I've seen
did,
it. I've
yeah.
seen it before and I forgot and I didn't
Yeah.
realize that was the play.
Because later on we do find out when Monica's working. That's the first time we're exposed to her job. She's working alongside of another chef who is a similar age female, and she had mentioned, you know, Monica mentions to her that she had went on a date with Paul, the wine guy, and she slept with him, and basically is telling her about how she fixed his ED. And then the girl who at this point doesn't even pick up on that it's a line is just like, what? No, like I'm the one who like got him up and running again. And you're like, okay. So I don't know. That was like a weird interaction to me too. Just like, so it was a quick way to reveal that Paul is sleazy and he's just lying. But the fact that like the other girl, upon learning that Monica slept with him, was all first off was just like, yeah, like everyone slept with Paul. I'm the one who fixed him. Like it's just like a weird.
The snap
Weird
in
angle.
his turtle, I believe, is what she said.
So
It is
that
crazy though.
was
Again, not to
weird.
always pull up like how would this age now, how was this then, or whatever. But I feel like, I found out he did this. He lied to me. He's doing this to all these other women. I'm going to step on his watch is not what the scene would be written as.
Yeah, I feel like this show transitions into Kids with him. You know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
movie Kids. Like that's just like it's wouldn't fly today in any way.
David Schwimmer did have a 40 down his pants for the majority of the filming. So
Then so like it was like later on when there's a scene where it's Joey and Chandler and Rachel's making them coffee. And it's like, so I guess that's how they start their day. They just go over because we don't know where they live at this point. So we're just like
Right.
there at all times. So
you assume it's close, but
come by for coffee, even though they hang out at a coffee shop all day, but they're going to go by their house for coffee. Rachel, who is apparently so removed from the real world, she's never made coffee in her life.
I've never made coffee in my life.
you've never made coffee before?
I don't drink coffee.
Okay, well, I guess that's fair. How do I not know that?
Okay,
The only answer he could have given to make that normal.
Yeah.
But we do establish in the first scene that Rachel does drink coffee, right? What does she order? Did she order a decaf or something?
No, they made
Yeah.
the decaf joke, which is another like super. She's all jittery.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Can I have a coffee?"
That's a
Like,
90s joke. If
make
I
it a
ever
decaf.
heard
It's
one.
Ah, right,
so
right, right.
90s.
And then she specifies sweet and low.
So
Yeah.
if you
Oh,
are a
yeah.
coffee drinker, and Freg, I'm sure even if tasked to do this, you would figure out how to make coffee.
I'm
I think
curious.
you're
What do you
giving me
think?
credit?
Ferg,
that
what
yeah,
do
let's
you
let's
think-
Ferg's cooking corner.
What I want you to explain to me what you think making coffee is. Like what would your first step be?
You put the little like cup thing in the Keurig, like,
No, like a coffee
I
filter
know, I'm
coffee.
kidding.
If you had like the old school Mr. Coffee, like
Yeah, if
would
you had
know
everything you
how
needed, what would you do?
You put the ground coffee, not the beans, because it's already ground, and the what's it called, the filter. You
How
run
much,
hot
though?
water through.
Yeah, I mean, so yes, that's it.
Yeah.
How much is not a good gauge though, right? Because everybody puts a different amount. Like I put it till the coffee's to the very, very top. Some people
Yeah,
use
but-
a teaspoon.
So
That's different.
Is that why Rachel's coffee was so bad? Was her ratio just terribly off? Was it so strong they couldn't drink it?
I feel like that's
I
the
think
only
it was-
way you can screw up coffee.
She used rat poison.
Yeah,
I
because
feel
too much
like it was
water will
too
make coffee
weak.
terrible no matter what, right? If it's watery and not flavorful enough, you don't have to use enough grounds.
And to
Right,
not
like I
stand
said,
in a way.
I don't have much knowledge of coffee, but maybe she didn't change the filter, and it was like an old dirty one.
That's possible too. That's a good
Yeah,
call.
yeah,
I didn't
there you
think of
go.
that.
Yeah. And look at Ferg, the man who's never made coffee, figuring out all potential reasons why her coffee might not be good. Ferg, who owns a hot dog toaster.
Don't mock my hot dog toaster.
Guys, we have a Rachel.
Also,
So,
them pouring the coffee into the plant was another one of those I genuinely laughed moments. I was writing down at this point. I was like, I was so sour on this. I wanted to hate it so much. It was terrible 90s Jeanine Garofalo jokes. And then by the end, at this point, I'm laughing way more than I want to. And then Phoebe says, everyone she knows kills herself. And I'm totally on board for a bit.
The Phoebe line that got me was like corny, but all she said was, "Oh, I wish I could, but I don't want to," and it was so stupid.
Yeah.
But it really made me. It was like my first like genuine laugh of the episode.
Yeah, her character, like I said before, she didn't have a lot of screen time to the point where you almost didn't know that she was going to be like a mainstay on the show. But everything she said was certainly impactful.
I liked her the most out of everybody so far in that episode. Like she just came off as the most likable to me. I
She's
don't know,
the one I
maybe
want
it's
to see
because
more
it was
of.
the like you could tell she's going to be the woman's comical relief, but I don't know, she just came off as just genuine and likable to me.
Yeah, so there's definitely like an element of this person definitely has the most interesting backstory. Like I definitely want to know the most about
Hit right out
where
the
she
gate.
came from.
As far as acting goes, I was kind of trying to judge them because when you're watching a show, right? I mean, obviously the acting comes off. I don't think any of them are bad actors. I do think Joey's the worst one. And I got to say Ross is probably the best one. I like I said, I wasn't a huge fan of his character at the beginning, but it wasn't because of his acting. It was, I would say it's probably because his acting was good. Like I think Joey was terrible as an actor in this episode though.
But it's kind of fun because he wants to be an actor, right? So at least it's enjoyable to be like, oh, this guy is so bad at this. And that's the character he's trying to play. I don't know if it's supposed to be meta or if it's just 1994.
Towards the end of the episode, there is there's a few things. So there was the scene where they're all back hanging out at Monica's house, and that's kind of when Phoebe gives us her weird backstory. And there was also the scene where Rachel cuts up her credit cards because she did some retail therapy, and they all had her cut her credit cards to be an adult.
Yep.
Which is weird because like she's obviously on bad terms with her father, but I guess her father still, I guess at this point, wouldn't cut her off. So they're all hanging at the house, and then they kind of flash forward again later. And this is basically the end of the episode. Ross is just the last one there, and a couple things. So now they have this dialogue, and this is the only thing, because from early in the episode, they're making it very clear like this is where the show is gonna go. And what I didn't like is they went there episode 1. And it was like,
Right.
It wasn't like a little hint. They just went straight for it. It was like, I always had a crush on you. And then she's like, yeah, I know. And it's like, going to go on a date. She's like, sure. And it's like, okay, so why do I need to watch the next episode now? Like you've told the complete story. Like, why are we doing this already?
I also found that in poor taste, knowing that she just broke up with her like husband. Like he was like, I don't want to say like creeping on her, but like
It was,
Yeah, but I guess
a
he
bit
just
too
had the same situation
vulnerable.
too. So they're both
That's
recently
true.
broken up.
yeah. So they're both in a weird spot, but I just thought like with any show, right? Like you're the whole point is to build to something. You don't want, it's the pursuit of seeing this relationship blossom is supposed to make it interesting. So
maybe the problem isn't that he asked. Maybe the problem is that she said like she would. She should have probably turned him down.
I just
But-
thought like you need
Yeah.
to end that show on like more of a, like you can keep it optimistic, but like don't just deliver that right there. Like, you know what I mean? Like they shouldn't be having that conversation too early. And
That should have ended this way. He should have said, I had a crush on you. Do you want to go on a date? And she should have said, yes, but I'm not ready yet.
Yeah.
And then it should have been super emotional. Then he would have been like, so like next week?
yeah.
That's how that would have made
And the laugh
sense
track,
and been
yeah.
funny. And instead they didn't do that. The writing was right there.
And do you find it weird that like, all right, so two people are sharing a cookie and that cookie's an Oreo, which is like not really a shareable cookie, especially when it's like you're twisting it. So someone's just going to get just that flat, dry cookie with no cream.
Who puts Oreos in a plate?
Rich New York 90s people.
That was more like,
afford to.
it felt like
Robert California too.
that
That's
came
also
off to
true.
me like there was like the scene was written as if like, there's a plate of cookies, they share a cookie. And then when they were getting the set ready, whoever was in charge of acquiring cookies decided to go with Oreos. And it's like, wait a minute, this isn't a shareable cookie. Like why is this
No, give me a Nilla wafer. Give me a Famous Amos. Give me a Chip
just
Ahoy.
a soft chocolate chip cookie, something you could break in half and share.
break an Oreo in half. It's the way he did it.
But no, like
Yeah, he did it
nothing should
wrong.
be- Like no one should be eating just a flat, dry half of Oreo. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
He broke it in
gonna
half
say.
the way a commercial would break it in half to show a
Mhm.
father showing his daughter how to share a cookie.
Yeah.
Like how to dunk it into a tea or something.
Yeah.
That's not what two people on a date or at a table would do. And also, he would just have eaten the cookie. You can tell by that dude. He would have been like, "Oh, you wanted this? A better joke again. Easier writing."
So we kind of came through like basically what happened throughout the episode. Like, so to go back, were there key things that like you noticed that we didn't touch on that were like, I don't know, relationship pairings you thought were going to happen, or like storylines that you thought they were trying to like hint towards? Like, what was catching your eye as you were watching this episode?
So this wasn't while I was watching, because I just thought of it now when you brought it up about the two of them they went all in on that right away. And I think you have to take into consideration that this was the pilot. They have to do that in the pilot, right? The pilot is to get the show going again.
Not
right?
necessarily, because I think as long as you are planting the seed, it's established this is why the show exists. Because other shows just don't do that. And as we go on and watch more shows, this might happen again. But like to
Yeah.
my recollection, I just can't think of a time where the obvious love interest situation is like established by the end of a 22-minute episode where the date has already been set.
I think
Yeah.
that happens in a lot of shows. I just don't think it works very well.
I feel like they're setting it up for failure. Like they're setting it up purposely to they're pushing it as fast as they can because they want you to watch the next episode, because based on everything that happened in this one, they all seem to be idiots and morons. So kind of I got the feeling that something was going to go wrong with it. I don't know. I'm probably the only one that thought that.
Although no, maybe, because like if on episode 1 there's this happy ending, then it's got to go down, right? Because then where does the show go from there? So maybe
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
maybe that's what it sets you up for, is to feel like, well, this is too good to be true. But who knows? But I personally thought that was a little soon.
One
Yeah,
thing we didn't touch on yet is the song. Thoughts on the song?
The intro song?
Yeah, I love it.
I
It's
think it's
catchy
fine.
AF, dude. You
Yeah,
I
can't
love it.
deny how catchy that
Yeah,
song
it's
is.
No.
it's an
Yeah, it's
iconic
good.
song. It's an earworm. It gets everyone in.
It's
It's
yeah,
perfect.
it's fine. For
If
what
you're
it
in the
does.
grocery store and that song's on, everybody will do the clap part.
you
You'll
can't-
walk down the aisle trying to
did an
buy some
extra
Oreos
clap.
to share with your future girlfriend. Everyone's doing the
Yeah.
clap.
So to take, because we're not touching on other episodes by talking about it, but yeah, that intro has certainly lasted the test of time. I think it's good for the show. It's upbeat. It's fun.
It does a good job of setting the mood.
It sets the mood, and the intro song actually establishes the mood of the show better than the actual intro video that accompanies it.
Yes.
If I was to watch just that, you would think it's just like a weird sketch comedy group or something like that, like some improv show.
It seems like something, that maybe Strangers with the Canadian group,
Upright
Kids in
Citizens
the Hall?
Brigade?
Kids in the Hall.
Kids in
It seems like a joke Kids in the Hall would make about a TV show. Like I can see Mark McKinney dancing around a fountain. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Is there anything else that we should touch on before we start wrapping up what we thought of Friends?
I just want to punch Chandler in the face. I can't stand his character at this point in time.
Yeah.
I hate him.
So my thought about Chandler was definitely
He's a
like
dick.
it was just too forced. Like I said, he was exclusively talking in one-line jokes, and it was like just too much. It was just
What stood out was his comments to Paul.
Yeah.
When he like overtly was like very sarcastic to Paul's face. He'd get punched in the head in any other reality, right? Like
No,
it's just
Paul was trying to get laid. He's not going to punch a friend.
Yeah, that's true. That guy would pull out all the stops to get laid,
It
apparently.
was just he's just a little too much. It's like, I don't know, it's in a way he's supposed to be like that voice in your head who's saying those things that you wouldn't actually say. But I just thought it was, like I said, with the exception of like maybe Monica, it was like, to me, every character was a little overly embellished. And that was too much. It was almost like the writers were instructed, do not give Chandler a regular line. He only gets one-liners.
Yeah.
And
One issue I would say I have that sort of comes up from everything you guys are now saying is I feel like there are too many people on the show, because you said Monica and you said Rachel, and in my head I'm trying to put them together. And I guess if you watch 10 seasons of a show, that's not a problem. But if somebody's only seen the first one, I have to really stretch a little to remember who is who.
It's uncommon. Like their shows don't do that. They still don't do that, right? With that many people as the main characters of the show.
yeah, they usually
Is
have
it
like
6?
3 to 4 focal.
Yeah,
characters.
3 and 3.
Yeah.
But even when you look at it, like, to go back, like I said, like Phoebe was kind of like like she was there, but she wasn't even really used as like an actual main character alongside of them. But this show, I guess we have the luxury of knowing beyond. So it's tough to pretend that we're going based on just that with the names, but they didn't even, and that was actually something in my notes. They did a really bad job because I mentioned it earlier with their names. Like they didn't tell you who they were up front either. So you have a lot of overload of characters and not a lot of knowing who's who. But I will be honest, with a lot of TV shows, there's a lot of shows that I watch and it takes me multiple episodes to know the names of characters.
Yeah, I don't think it's as important as we think it is.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, I didn't really get everybody's name either, like towards the end of that first episode, except for a couple of people.
They were
Like,
rarely
they didn't do a good job of that at
which
all.
is fine.
So what
But
they
if you
did,
said the
though-
girl with the big hair or the girl who's the chef or the girl who's the wine guy,
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
understand it more. But you guys are all saying it as their character names. And that's hard with only just the one episode because I have to take a super hard look at like, oh, which one was that?
With the girls, I get they did a better job with the girls than I think the guys. Like when you say like Chandler, I'm still, trying to figure out which one is Chandler, and which one is Ross, because they just didn't do a good job on like the guy end either.
They're
So,
also establishing the main characters too, right? They're all the main character, right? But Ross and Rachel are the main characters of this show.
that's where the show is leading.
So they
very
have to
knowing
get
in
them. They only have what, like 22 minutes to get this entire story out for this pilot episode.
which is
So-
interesting because when you think of back to the initial like intro scene, they're the only 2 that aren't there to start the show. Like it's the
Right.
other 4.
Yeah.
That enter the 2 other characters.
So so they only have so much time. So they had to get the main characters, to start their story there, right? You don't need to get into Phoebe and you don't need to get into Joey. You don't need to do that right away. So as the story progresses, and if they catch people with the Ross and the Rachel, then they're going to have a lot of time to then that's when you get into the rest of the cast. So I don't think they had to do that in the first episode.
So
That makes sense.
Looking back now, we're almost at 17 years since this episode debuted. Do you find that watching it now?
Wait, 17 years?
Bad math, 27 years.
Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say
27 years. I'm sorry. So 27 years later, when you watch this episode, does it have an evergreen feel to it, or does it scream 90s to you the entire time you watch it? Like, can you take yourself out of the setting and the haircuts and just watch it for what it is and not feel like you're being taken back? Or is that like, do you see that before you see the story?
That's a good question.
I can, just because they didn't move around too much. They had like 4 central locations, so it really wasn't a lot to take you out of. You didn't see like old cars, you didn't see more 90s stuff. You just saw they looked a little odd because they had the big hair and stuff, but there wasn't enough in one episode for me to say like, oh, I can't get out of this 90s vibe, you know?
See, to me, if anything actually put me in the 90s more than the visuals, it's kind of the way it's more the writing and the humor was the thing I felt was a little more dated than the actual visual at times. And it wasn't extreme. It was a couple jokes, like we said, wouldn't go today. And the characters, like, I just think like modern shows are written a little different, where characters are written a little more realistic than they used to be, even with sitcoms at times. And that maybe made it feel a little dated to me. But to go back to you guys, did you guys feel that that the show is kind of evergreen, or did it seem too off?
It's hard for me as a first time watcher, and I think about Seinfeld so much, and I loved Seinfeld, and I watched that when it was new at the same time. I don't look back at Seinfeld and think of it as looking remarkably 90s, but this just looks so dated to me. That's not a problem. I watch plenty of stuff that looks dated, but I feel like you can't escape when it's from.
It doesn't like bog it down.
I was going to say the only time that I really, really felt like it was in the 90s was looking at Rachel talking on the phone, on the cordless phone, to her father when she was I think it was right when she first got into Monica's apartment. Look at that telephone with the huge antenna on it. That's the only time that I was like, whoa, look at that.
Old technology.
Remember that.
We'll do that.
Yeah. Also, all of them together watching those tiny ass TV when a giant group of them. Like,
they're watching TV and they go to the sign off screen. The actual station they're watching signs off for the night and plays the national anthem. That is something I had not thought about. I
didn't even think of that. Yeah.
Do we go back? I guess something we missed, like the scene where they're just all watching Spanish speaking television, it just seemed very out of place. It was just like, I don't know if it was just for a cheap laugh or if we're establishing, like, the way I try to like picture it in my head to like justify it is like, are they trying to show us that like this group is very on the same page with humor? This makes sense to all of them to just sit here and watch this like Spanish speaking like television show for no reason.
I think it just points out the
and don't have cable.
Yeah, I got they didn't have cable, but again, I couldn't make anything make heads or tails of it.
Yeah, I think we've all watched Spanish TV. There was one channel that played Point Break in Spanish every Friday night, and we would watch it every Friday night. And to this day, if I see that movie, I can't not go, Policia! Like, it's in there. So I totally get it, but it did seem weird in that setting.
But all right, so to start wrapping things up, I guess we'll just go around. Like, based on what you saw in the first episode alone, would you greenlight this show? Would you cancel it? Or at the very least, is there some sort of interest to watch episode 2? Gordo, you first.
Greenlight, 100%. There's something to it.
Something about it hit you?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the fact that the love interest manifested at the end, you don't know all the characters yet, and so you're gonna want to find out. You're gonna want to find out where their story goes, what the whole overarching story of this sitcom is, because it doesn't really establish it outside of, Ross and Rachel might like each other. Like, you don't get if there's a central theme or anything like that. I'm interested. I want to see more.
Ferg?
Yeah, green light. There's enough up in the air that the completionist in me needs to see how those play out. And Yeah, I got some genuine good laughs on a show, on something I've seen before. It had enough. I would definitely give it the green light.
Nick?
Yeah, I think what you're trying to get out of a show in the end of the day is to be amused. And I was amused the whole time. As a fan of the show, I tried to put all of that aside and maybe even try to go the other way, but I have to greenlight it.
Joe?
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it. I hate that, but I love sitcoms. I love terrible sitcoms. And this, from episode 1, looks like a show that's no better or no worse than 1,000 shows I've watched 200 episodes of that were just terrible. So green light all the way, and I'll probably be watching this. The second one started, and we had to really fight to press pause and not just be like, well,
I did the same thing.
What about you, Jay?
All right, so for me, I would say yes, I would give it a green light. I wasn't in love with episode 1. There was nothing about it that like I had no like laugh out loud moments personally. I thought a little bit was a little eye rolly, but the show is fine for what it is. I was curious enough to see where it was going that I'd want to keep watching. So I guess I would also give it the green light. So, for us, that's 5 green lights. So, congratulations, friends. We'll see you for episode 2. So to wrap things up, guys, that was our very first episode of S1E1. Thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to subscribe for our podcast. We should be on all platforms. On top of that, you can find us at S1E1 Pod on Twitter, on Instagram, and I don't know. I think that's about it for now. So
you can find all of those at S1E1pod.com also.
There you go. That makes way more sense to play. Go to S1E1.com and that will send you a link to all
S1E1 Pod.
S1E1pod.com.
We'll get there.
You're the worst.
Episode 1 of
Canceled.
S1E1. So sorry about that, but moving on. Thank you guys so much again for listening, and we will catch you again next week.